I call to order the special meeting, April 23rd, 2019, of the Saline County Board of Commissioners for the purpose of a jail population reduction meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Shadwick.
Here.
Commissioner Sparks.
Here.
Commissioner Vidrickson.
Here.
Commissioner Weiss.
Here.
Commissioner Wyatt.
Here.
In keeping with our normal procedure, we will ask that you please stand and join me in the flag salute, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First, welcome on behalf of the Saline County Board of Commissioners. We want to thank you for taking the time out of your evening to join us in this discussion on the Saline County Jail project. The meeting will be recognized as a regular county commission meeting, and all normal procedures need to be followed. You will need to be recognized by the chairman to speak. Please state your name and address when you do speak. That having been said, the meeting will be solely about the jail project. Non-related subjects will not be discussed. Commissioners have been adamant about hearing from the public, and thus the town hall meeting was called. Keep in mind, there's been very little discussion amongst commissioners, and absolutely no conclusion has been reached, so this is wide open and go. My personal focus is about spending in excess of $1.4 million annually that go out of county in contract housing. How we stop that flow of money should be our main concern. How we go about doing that revolves around the options that are being presented this evening and beyond, and possibly other ideas yet to come. Let me first thank everyone who's been a part of this discussion or served on the board or the committees, especially Hannah Stambaugh and Andrew Manley, who have been on staff in their current positions for less than 30 days, and they have done a marvelous job, I assure you. They've certainly stepped up to the plate on this one. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our former administrator, Rita Deister, sitting over here in the beautiful red coat. Rita has no doubt worked on every jail project that's been come along for the last 25 or 30 years. She's been a big part of the history of Saline County for sure. Also, big thank yous go out to Sheriff Roger Solden and Community Corrections Annie Greaves. They worked very hard in this endeavor also. They played vital roles in putting together tonight's presentation. We've structured the evening to include a short presentation on information and the history, followed by a question and answer session, and finally an open forum where we will ask you for your ideas and input. If you've not already picked up a handout, please do so. We hope the information will aid in the discussion and help answer some of the common misconceptions and provide information. To assist us with this evening's event during the presentation, if you have a question, we ask that you legibly write it down and place it with Hannah. After the presentation, she will assist with moderating a majority of the questions. We may not get to them all, but we're certainly going to try to, and we intend to. Some of the ground rules: we will not answer questions that are inappropriate in nature or those that do not directly relate to the jail or jail population reduction. We will not be answering any questions regarding potential locations or relocation of a jail facility. We will conduct an open forum at the end of the meeting to allow citizens to speak their input and moving forward. I'm being a little bit redundant there, but with that, I will turn it over to Sheriff Solden to provide a short history and a brief on the Saline County Jail. Sheriff?
Thanks, Commissioner. Well, maybe. The Saline County Jail that we have now, the Sheriff's Office and Jail was built in 1962 to replace the Sheriff's Office Jail that was built in 1902. So it served 60 years before this one was constructed. That jail that was built in 62 served Saline County's needs until the late 80s. In 1989, we outgrew that jail, and the consultant was hired at that time, and this kind of history going over itself. But consultant was hired to make a recommendation, working with the committee, and the recommendation was that put on the ballot for a half-cent sales tax, which was passed in 1992 for a $7.2 million addition. That was completed in 1995. That brought the jail's capacity up to 192. They kept 40 beds in the old jail that the county owned, And the other half of the jail, the other beds were in a jail that the city owns, that they use for evidence storage to this day. One thing about that jail, when it opened, the sales tax had paid for it, and the tax ended that year. The current facility, the 192-bed facility, has been over capacity since 2010. That's when we first went over. And we started contract housing in the fall of 2011, following quite a bit of issues with inmates in the jail and assaults on staff. This is just a chart that goes back as far as we have records to 1977 with the history of the average daily population in the Saline County Jail. Looking back through the years, as you can see, the population was around 50. I started in January of '88, and the population was getting right at that 62 inmate number, and it continued to rise. It's kind of up and down, but for the most part, it's a slow, gradual climb, and that's not just Saline County. That's kind of a common denominator nationwide. When we entered into the contract housing, this has got a chart show you what the daily population. I said in 2010 we went over, and our average daily population that year was 210 inmates. We didn't have any contract housing, and we didn't have any trips. In October of 2011, we started contract housing. The average that we had out for those 3 months was 26 inmates, and we took 22 trips in those 3 months. And then you can kind of go down the chart if you'd like. But the last full year, of course, was last year. Our average daily population was 268.9, or 270 inmates. On an average, we had contract housed outside would be 86 inmates. And we took 610 trips last year solely for contract housing. That doesn't include extraditions or any other trips that the sheriff's office had to take. Those were just simply trips from here to the facilities that we house with. To give you an idea, the first full year that we housed outside, on this map, the circles are representative of the number of inmates housed in each one of these county jails. And in 2012, we used Gary County, Cloud County, and, or not Cloud County, we used Gary County, Ottawa County, Mitchell County, and we did have inmate housed in McPherson County. As you can see, in 2018, the growth of not only the number housed outside, but the locations that they're housed out has grown quite a bit. The farthest to the north we go is Washington County. The farthest to the west we go is Graham County. Currently, Butler County, we've housed quite a few inmates in Butler County. And last year I did get a contract signed with Ford County as the next stop for us. Fortunately, we haven't had to haul them to Ford County, but they're our next stop. One of the things about Kansas is there's a lot of sheriff's offices and there's a lot of counties, and several don't have jails at all. They use neighbors' jails because they have 1 or 2 inmates, and their population base is so low that they may have 8 or 10 beds, and they just don't have space to take our inmates, or they don't have the staff. A lot of the small jails just don't have the staff that they don't want to take inmates.
Roger, if I could, just a second. For those of you that may not be familiar with Kansas geographics and counties, Graham County is Hill City. That's about 80 miles northwest of Hayes. Ford County is Dodge City, and that's 165 miles away.
So the bottom line as far as the sheriff's office and kind of what rang the commissioner's bell, when the new commission came in, I told them, and most of us took office in 2016, and I told them that what had kind of a little bit of the history, and I gave them the information I had then, and I guessed that in 2017 I was going to be probably $1.2 million in contract housing cost. Fortunately, I didn't hit that number, but I'm not too far off. We ended up with $1,149,000 in 2017, and the population did come down a little bit in 2018, but that's not uncommon for us to see a dip, and then the trend goes up. The contract housing cost total there is just over $5 million, and the trip expenses that we've spent along the way total $366,584. That's taken into officer salaries for those trips and mileage for the vehicles. So to the end of when we started contract housing and to this point, we've spent You can see in the big red numbers, 5,300,000+. So what's been done by us to address this issue so far? In 2010, when the jail went over, I had the privilege of being the captain of the jail, and in 2011, we contacted the National Institute of Corrections and to ask them to do a system review of the criminal justice system in general. And really the biggest thing that came out of that is that they asked us or recommended that we hire a consultant to complete a needs assessment, which is the process we're in now. We did hire that consultant at that time. You can see in the red numbers where our average daily population was through the years. One of the things the consultant recommended was drug court was established, and that was something that had been discussed already. But at his recommendation, I think it kind of got us off the bubble to get drug court going, and Annie will talk about that in just a moment. The criminal justice complex and the jail expansion was put on the ballot in 2014, and it was up until that year, I think it was just the jail, and then in the last they decided to take on all the issues that the courts and community corrections problems and all that at one time. And so that's where the community corrections, that's where that justice complex idea came from. That failed at the election. In 2015, the commission, in an attempt to try and rein in some of the contract housing costs we'd been incurring, appointed a jail reduction committee to see what the county could do to rein that in, and Annie's going to discuss that also in a minute. Like I said, we took office in 2016, and 2017, I guess it was 2017, we actually had a discussion at the end of the year, and the commissioners decided that we needed to hire a consultant and do a needs assessment, and the commission did hire a consultant to do a needs assessment. One of his recommendations was pretrial services. They were implemented at the recommendation of the consultant, and that just started here recently, and Annie's going to cover that as well. And then April 8th of this month, he reported his final report to the county commission for options for us to deal with the jail space issues.
All right, thank you. We will, didn't mean to interrupt you, Annie, but I'm just going to
I
introduce
was
you.
interrupting you, sorry.
Annie Grievous is our Community Corrections Director and has served in that capacity for 30 years.
Since 87.
I know she doesn't look that old, but we hired her young. So at any rate, Annie will give us a report on the Jail Reduction Committee history.
Yes. So we were asked to put this committee together in 2016. The Board of County Commissioners were looking at a jail reduction plus recidivism, not just reducing the beds, but reducing the amount of clients returning to the jail. And so best practices were always considered and looked into the future. We had several meetings. The committee was very, very good about attending and participating. We had lots of discussion. A lot of data was provided to us on population numbers. We couldn't get a good handle of who was really in there, what the needs of the clients were, and what those kind of things. The data doesn't give you that. And so we did have multiple providers from the community come in and talk to us about options and how they might be able to integrate some services into the current existing jail. But when you go back and you look at the existing facility, there wasn't a lot of space to integrate groups and allow different activities to occur that would be evidence-based to show success. So that was always a barrier that came up with us. It wasn't just the committee. We met with defense attorneys, court personnel, judges. We looked at many, many options. We talked about the pretrial and the drug court, which I will talk about a little later. And we kind of got to the point where we didn't really feel like we could impact as a committee the reduction of the bed space, but more the recidivism. So if we could really know what kind of clients in there on a regular basis and what the needs are of that client, maybe we could reduce the return time. And I had excellent committee members, excellent support from the county commission, but also from the sheriff's office staff. And we sat through 2 full days of training. We learned how to assess trauma of women inside the jail, and we collected a lot of that data. That all went to our consultant that the sheriff mentioned earlier, Jim Robertson, and to give us a better picture of what the female population in the jail is looking like, because we were seeing an increase of those also. And so in addition to the meetings and the work we did, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes efforts, meetings that involved everybody that played a role in, from the arrest all the way through the process. And then meeting with the clients and that are sitting in jail and finding out, where are their needs and what brings them here. So I always want to say we really need to be cognizant and commend the efforts of the county that didn't just decide, well, you got to build it bigger because we got so many. We know that's not the most effective way to answer this problem, and I don't think you build yourself out of an issue. And we knew that going in with our committee. And so really good work was done, and I couldn't have done it without the opportunities I was given through the commission. But we met with 3 consultants, and Jim Robertson was hired to complete the needs assessment. He worked long and hard with us, and again, like I said, took the data we collected from our assessments within the jail.
So like Annie said, on January 16th, the Board of County Commissioners did contract with Jim Robertson with Voorhees Robertson Justice Services to conduct a jail needs assessment. This needs assessment consisted of 3 core tasks: to analyze the current inmate population, provide recommendations to deal with the inmate population, and project future capacity needs. So in order for the committee to know how to address the inmate population, we needed to know who was in jail, why were they in jail, how long were they in jail, and what their reason for release was. The analogy we like to use was the water barrel analysis. There are multiple factors that could contribute to the water level or the inmate population. Are we admitting more criminals? Are they staying longer? Or is it both? This is something that we needed to know. So after the data was compiled, it became immediately apparent that the average length of stay was the primary driver to average daily population. On this chart behind me in 2008, you'll see the average length of stay was 8 days, and the average daily population was 143. Fast forward to 2017, our average length of stay was 20.4, causing the average daily population to swell to 263. In that same time period, the total annual bookings actually dropped 28%, further confirming that average length of stay was the primary driver of average daily population. For context, our jail can house 163. So Jim Robertson gave us 3 recommendations. Again, based upon data, he believed implementing a pretrial program could have a significant impact on reducing the jail population. This was his first recommendation. He also recommended analyzing the court hearing dockets as well as sentencing decision making. The latter 2 recommendations are still in the exploratory phase, but are recommended as the next steps in improving our system. Once Jim Robertson had a good snapshot of the current inmate population and the recommendations to reduce this population, he could properly project future capacity needs. Assuming a pretrial program was implemented and changes were made to the docketing and sentencing decision-making, Jim Robertson still estimated a small but steady increase in average daily population over the next 20 years. He derived 2 scenarios to estimate average daily population. Scenario number 1 showed Saline County needing 417 beds, and scenario number 2 showed a need of 338 beds. Again, these estimates assume that all 3 recommendations are implemented and having an impact on average length of stay. If the committee elected only to do 1 or 2 of these recommendations, these projections would change.
Okay. So now we're going to move into the accomplishments of the committee, which is presented once again by Annie Grievous.
Thank you. So drug court's on there. It wasn't a piece of the committee at the time. It started in 2013, but it was a recommendation, but also something that our judges and community corrections and others have been looking at for a long time. With the startup funds and from the county commission, we believed we could make an impact. Drug court, if you look nationwide, it's a hot item right now. The state of Kansas is is even looking at a possibility of funneling money there for drug courts across the state of Kansas. I feel very, very blessed that we're one of 4 drug courts in the state of Kansas. And so I just wanted to say, since 2013, we have served 324 clients. We've graduated 104. That seems like a small number, but you got to remember, drug court is a mandatory 18-month program, and very few make it through in 18 months. They're allowed to restart. They're allowed to continue. This is not a program that you have substance abuse, you have substance issues, you're not automatically put in jail. You're put in treatment. You're put in sober living. You're put in resources. We funnel lots and lots of resources to this population of clients. And so we see success, but sometimes it's a 24-month period they're in. If you ever get an opportunity to come observe drug court, it's every Monday at 1 o'clock. Judge Johnson holds the docket. We have a pre-meeting prior to that involves a treatment team made up of county attorney, defense attorneys, and many providers within the city of Salina. And so it's a team that has learned and grown, and we always send a group of people to national conference. We're based on evidence. We know that what we do will work if you apply the practices. So from that graduation, I said 104 have graduated. Out of that, our recidivism rate, or our success rate, holds at 89%. So that's unheard of. For long-term substance abuse addicted clients to maintain success and stay out of trouble and clean over that long period of time is amazing. We run 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months out and more of NCIC checks, which means we're running a nationwide or a United States-wide check to see if they've committed new offenses. We're monitoring them. Many of them are still on after they've graduated because they owe fines or fees, and so we also have that ability. So to have that success rate is a huge accomplishment, and at every point of our checking, we exceed the national average. We've never even been at their average. And right now, 113 clients are currently in drug court. So we consider drug court, we don't know exactly how many bed spaces that's saving or what it's doing, but we know there's an impact there. Then the pretrial program, it was recommended from our consultant, and we were delighted again that the commission stepped up and funded the startup of that program. It has taken several months to get policy procedure. This is a program that was not designed by my agency. It was designed by our judges in our district court. They knew what they wanted. They've been wanting pretrial for 10 years. So they developed the assessment, they developed the matrix, and they developed the bonding schedule. And all that, along with policy and procedure that we helped facilitate, is completely dictated and run by the district court judges. We facilitate the program. So on April 15th, we literally started assessing clients coming into the jail. Also, the judges are allowing for requests to them for clients that are already in the jail and didn't have an opportunity to this program to be assessed. And as long as the judge approves those, we are assessing those. So we're not just waiting for them to be arrested. Some have already been assessed that have been sitting in there anyways. Since, and I'm going to say 6 days, literally, we've had 19 clients assessed and 17 clients are out, were released. They all reported to our agency. They were all clean, and they made their first court docket. Now, that's just telling you a very small snapshot of a very new program, but we're very excited. We want to continue this. We don't know what the future holds, but we do know what the evidence tells us about pretrial, and it can be successful if you apply the practices, which we intend to do. The other things are some additional services. The jail, or the sheriff's office has already contracted with the mental health center, and they're doing some services in-house based on their limited capacity, and so that's a positive. What we've seen is not only increase on the mentally ill clients coming into our agency, but they're going to the jail. And we've got to figure out a way to stop the returning action, and so the sheriff took it upon himself with money from the commissioners to address some of that, and we hope that makes an impact. We addressed it on the outside. We'll continue to do that. So those are just some things that we'll continue to look at. I think there's a lot of evidence-based programs out there that could be implemented inside the jail and put together with reentry and carried on outside in supervision. We will continue to look at those practices and implement as we move along, but they're not an easy process. It takes time, and it takes a lot of effort and reviewing of the systems. The other two things that were recommended by the consultant is just a review of the court process systems and streamlining that process. We're continuing to work. The county attorney, the judges, and the defense attorneys have been very gracious with us and working with us, and we'll continue to look for those triggers we see or things that might impact the length of stay at the jail and different things, and continue that collaboration so that we're always looking for those efforts.
All right, thank you, Annie. So, where are we at now? We have essentially 4 options that have come before us from the consultant that we're considering. And option number 1 is continue with the contract housing. And the advantages of that is there is no capital investment, and the pretrial services is implemented, and the average length of stay is managed. The disadvantages are lengthy, as you can tell. The cost will exceed $1 million a year. There's no question about that. Roger, you can speak to on our contract housing. When we enter into a contract for $35 per stay, is that a year's?
It's annual.
Annual. It's an annual contract, so there's no guarantee that past the next year that we're going to get it for $35, and we're as high as what, $45 probably in some of the places right now, $35 and $40.
Yeah, Gary County was 45 last time we had a contract with them. But when last time we reached out to them, they were at 65. And that's pretty common, especially in the eastern part of the state. That's kind of what's pushed us west. And they just don't have the space. And we don't have any control over that cost. That's not something that's controlled by statute. It's
Right.
just, it's up to that county what they charge. And what we saw last year was when one county got 35, the rest of them came and they wanted 35. So,
Yeah.
you know, and that 35 is actually a bargain because we were paying $30 a day when we were contract housing in the early 90s. So
All right.
it's really fairly reasonable, but it's not a guarantee.
Another disadvantage is inmate transportation risks. In most cases, when the van leaves, there's only one deputy in that van, if I'm not mistaken.
At
Depending on
times.
how many, at times there are, if they have 3 or 4 people, I think there's only one. And if you go more than that, why?
Yeah,
So you've got more people. There's no guarantee of adequate bed space to handle the growth. No control, as we just stated, of the contract pricing. Ongoing maintenance issues such as building ages, limited parking, significant expenses over 20 years, and delayed capital expenditures. So, option number 2, and what is option number 2? Well, we renovate some of the existing jail and build a different building altogether, which would be a booking release center. Whether that would be built on site right there or somewhere totally in a different part of the city, I don't know. Those would be the things that we need to explore. Another option has come up is the old juvenile center over here, that we could have an intake center there. So the advantages include that the current facility is utilized. It allows for future expansion, does not require eminent domain. Pretrial services is implemented once again, and the average length of stay is managed. The disadvantages, potential land acquisition, 2 facilities that you have to maintain and operate and staff. Some of the services then would become duplicated. We still have ongoing maintenance issues, building ages, and limited parking. We go to option number 3, and this would be adding infrastructure on site. So the current facility, once again, is an advantage, and it's utilized. Pretrial services, once again, and average length of stay is once again managed. Disadvantages may require land acquisition or eminent domain. security during renovations and construction, and that would cost more deputies, overtime, et cetera. Ongoing maintenance issues as the building ages, and again, limited parking. Option number 4 is a new facility at a greenfield site. There are a lot more advantages to that than there are disadvantages, but one of them, the big disadvantage is obviously the capital investment. It would require land acquisition and eminent domain. The advantages would be, in the long run, lower operating costs. It provides staffing and housing efficiencies. It would be all new construction, potential utility savings, allows for future expansion, meets the agency needs, limited security issues during construction, pretrial services implemented, average length of stay is once again managed. So, if you haven't already turned in your questions to Hannah, and if you haven't, well, please do so. And Hannah, we will enter that portion of our meeting at this time and ask you to read the questions one by one, and we'll get them to the appropriate person to hopefully get an answer.
Okay. So we've got a couple of them so far. We'll start off with the first one. It is my understanding that the current jail facility was built so it could be expanded vertically. Is there additional, or if it is, why would additional ground be needed?
Roger, I'll probably call on you for that one.
I'm not exactly sure. I was told it wasn't, but that would be something that could absolutely be looked at with an architect. The issue with going up is the staffing that's required to manage each floor. It'd be like the security in this room. It's pretty easy for me to secure this room, but I can't secure the one above me. I can't see what's going on. And so you run into that with a jail that's stacked.
Okay, so we really can't answer that question. We don't have a maintenance person here or an architect that could tell us the exact answer to that question. So, next one.
Kind of in relation to that, what kind of updates or renovations are needed for the current jail?
Once again, I'll call on you, Roger.
The list is getting more lengthy every year. We've got quite a few requests in. Some of it's been approved, and to be honest, this year we've got it's $200,000 or $300,000 worth approved that I've been waiting to see what's going to happen with this, because I hate to spend the county's money to put in things that we might have to tear out. So if no decision's reached, then we're going to have to move forward and do things. I know we need a roof. One of the biggest unknowns is how much we've replaced bits and pieces of the sewer that's underneath the jail, and every piece that we've dug up hasn't been a sewer line. It's basically what's rusted away, and it's running through the clay in the ground. So as things get flushed down toilets, which in jail is pretty common, when they auger that out as the ground gives way, we're in a situation where we have to jackhammer up the floor of the jail and replace that pipe. That's not something that I can predict. It might be next week. You know, we've had it in different cells. We've replaced most of that in the booking area, but there's still some of that to be done. But that's a small percentage of that very large building that you see sitting over there. So there are things that the jail, when it was constructed, they put sliding doors in that aren't common jail doors anymore. So when things break, that's not something that you can just call the next door neighbor plumbing shop and get pieces for. So, the place was put in with an analog intercom system. So that intercom system, as pieces of it die, if it was put in today, it'd be completely different. But it was the modern for the time. And so there are things that fail due to age, and we've experienced that with the intercom. We've experienced it with the control system, and the fixes that were put in place were the best fix we could put in place at the time. But I think over time, we're going to have to revisit those things. So there's going to be ongoing expenses with the building we have, no different than any other one. It's just the average lifespan of a jail, particularly the jails that were built in the past, are 25 to 35 years is kind of what I've been told. by people that are in the business is the life expectancy of that building.
The one thing that we can add to that is that the jail, unlike this building, 5 o'clock normally, the building's vacated. Nobody's here on Saturday, nobody's here on Sunday. The jail is operating 24/7, full of people who want to destroy everything that's there. So it gets abused pretty routinely. So, Hannah?
Okay. Let's see. We may not be able to answer this particular question, but it's probably something worth to be able to consider, or maybe there has been discussions. Has there been a talk or use of a night court to be considered that may reduce the number of overnight stays?
Annie, can you?
Yeah, I can tell you that, along with Rita Deister, and I can't even remember who was in all the rooms all the time, but we did talk about night court. And I think that's a practical, sensible thing to do. The problem is, we don't have enough judges. And Rita and I even went so far to see if we could buy a judge. We wanted to know, could the county pay for a judge, and we were shot down by the Supreme Court here in Kansas, so that doesn't work. We looked at various options. We were willing to even go to a different space. But you can't buy a judge, and you can't just build a courtroom. And so those were the main concerns, that we just didn't have it. I mean, it goes right along with, we could use another juvenile drug court. We could use a mental health court. There's a lot of things out there that we know would impact. But until the legislators decide that Saline County should be getting their judges that they were predicted to get many, many years ago, I don't see that being an option, unfortunately.
Okay, we have added an additional room for juvenile court downstairs that's just recently been opened, which supposedly was going to help free up space upstairs to where they could move the district courts along a little quicker. So that's one of those things that's helped also. So.
Okay. The next question, in 2014 and then 2018, 2019, the county used the same consulting company, the same consultant. In 2014, the proposal was to build a criminal justice center and a jail at $46.5 million. In 2019, the numbers that came back for a jail, new construction, was $75 to $82 million. Why the increase?
Well, obviously, in 5 years, everything has gone up immensely as far as I'm concerned. The construction costs have skyrocketed, number one. Number two, I think Commissioner Weiss brought it up that actually the cost per bed is cheaper in 2019 than it was in 2014 as far as construction costs go, the number of beds versus the cost. But that is the dramatic increase there. Keep in mind that the consultant that we use is not in the construction business. I mean, he's simply telling us what he thinks would best get us to the next point of being a viable option for us. So he's not in the construction business. Andrew?
The 2014 ballot compares mostly to option 3 that we presented you today. So comparing, just because the 2014, everybody considered it the Taj Mahal, it was a Justice Center complex. Just because it was labeled that doesn't mean that it was equivalent to the brand new Greenfield site. It is far more expensive to build a jail, the square footage related to a jail, than it is to do finished space or office space or, sheetrock and flooring. So they are apples and oranges when you compare the two. But if you were to compare the two, option 3 is the closest version of that. And option 3, in our new projections, the cost were in the 40 to 50 million. So they are similar. I think Sheriff has told me if you take that 46.5 million from 2014 and build the exact same thing today, that number would be 58 million. So.
Okay.
This is a kind of multi-layered question, but it all fits together. So why are the bonds so high? Was this taken into consideration during the assessment? Could the bond schedule be reworked to accommodate that personal need?
Well,
Well, you're probably the most
well,
knowledgeable
thank
among
you.
the
Thank you.
group
I
here,
might be
so.
the most knowledgeable. I doubt it. I think I saw Amy Norton in here somewhere, but I'm not going to call her out. She might be running away now.
Well, she would like to speak at
Well, let me just tell you what I do know. Part of the bond schedule was impacted through our pretrial program. What the judges wanted to do was pull away from the existing bond system and look at opportunities for clients that can't afford those higher bonds that are lower risk to get out. And so now, if you look at the pretrial information, you compare their bond matrix compared to the old one, you'll see a large reduction in the bonds. I mean, significant reduction in bonds are there now. And so if the client falls into a level of risk and the judges have determined that risk based on the assessment that they established and developed, they fall into certain categories of risk. They then are given certain amounts of bond, and they are lower than what the previous. If they're willing to participate in pretrial, they get that opportunity. If they choose not to participate in pretrial, the judges have no other choice but to go back to the old bonding system, and they're in that system. It's too early right now for me to even talk about what we're doing and how the difference is and how many choose pretrial and not pretrial, but that's what's going on. So in effect, pretrial program did reduce the bond in some cases. Does that answer it all?
I think so.
It kind of did for me, for certain. I'm not, I hope it did for the person that wrote the question, so. Hannah?
So this is for those, a majority of the inmates that are incarcerated for over that 90-day period, are a majority of them already convicted of a crime?
You'd have to look at every individual inmate. In most cases, no. Typically, if they've been convicted of a crime, they've either been moved on to prison, put on community corrections, if they've passed sentencing. But that doesn't apply to all of them. You know, you could be sentenced to a year in the county jail for DUI. Frankly, we don't see a lot of that. Most of the people that are there for pretrial issues.
So I think another part of that equation is the fact that you have defense attorneys. Nothing against them, they're doing their job, but they get continuances and that keeps that person in jail without a conviction, without a trial. But they're simply doing their job. I recognize that. So, next.
What are some of the factors that are driving the increase of the length of stay? And are there ways that we could look at decreasing those lengths of stay?
I could touch on a little bit of that. One of the things that we're doing that's driving our length of stay, in my opinion, is contract housing. I've got a third of my inmates outside of the county, so they can't see their attorneys. Their attorneys are welcome to drive up and see them. That said, that's typically not going to happen, especially if they're court-appointed attorneys. They have so many clients, there's no way for them to go see them. So they'll wait till they get here and try and meet with their clients right before they go into court. Well, if they're not ready to move forward or they don't have the information they need, they ask for a continuance. That continuance drives our average length of stay. So in that circumstance, we're our own worst enemy. And if you look at that, if you would look at that average length of stay, when it really skyrocketed, it was when we started housing inmates outside. You know, that average length of stay is driven by several things. Continuances in the court, it's just, that's where it comes from. You know, I don't have any control over when their court dates are. The court dates are set by the court. I don't have anything to say about when they're let out. That's up to the court as well. So, but the average length of stay, from what I can see, you know, having a third of my inmates outside of the county, the long-term solution isn't a great one, because we're creating our own circular, or as I see it, we're creating part of this problem ourselves.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, I don't know specifically, and honestly, in just the years I've been doing this and the research, and I know what's involved, you literally have to go in and look at every individual, because some of them have 6 cases, some of them have 1, they can't bond out, some of them have been out, committed another offense, or they have something that impacts them both at municipal court and district court. There's a multiple of opportunities it could be, and I think unless somebody goes in and literally delves into every client that's in there, and you would almost have to do it over a period of time and monitor a trend to get a good feel of what drives that length of stay. Where are we? I don't think you can do just a snapshot of one day. And so that was not done, that you're talking about a lot of work, and I can't even imagine what it costs to do something like that. But we're hoping that the work that we're doing in drug court and pretrial and some of the other things that are going on in the court system to streamline some of those efforts will reduce the longer lengths of stay.
I'd like to add the unfunded mandates from the state as contributing to this as well. I mean, this picture, there's 10 or 15 things affecting average length of stay. And when we talked about this, because that's the first thing this committee went to, as soon as you saw that chart said average length of stay was up 154%, that's right where we went. And once we dove into the people spending 91 plus days, so that you'll hear that term a lot. So we wanted to know, because they were the ones consuming the most amount of jail beds. So we focused on the people spending 91 plus days. The unfortunate part of that is there's not one silver bullet, because there's about 10 or 15 things affecting average length of stay. Unfunded mandates is one of those, and I think you guys could talk more about that. But as Sheriff alluded to, if a felony DUI requires a 1-year dip, that may have used to be in a state prison, but now they're saying, you know what, county, why don't you just hold them for a year? Well, there's the variety of situations like that where the state is pushing these inmates back on us to hold them here. I think it's less than a year sentences typically. And I think they're talking about doing more of it.
I would say that community corrections was kind of an unfunded mandate, but I hate to do that. But that goes on all the time. And the ones that we're seeing currently are, there was a law enacted a couple years ago that mandated before you could revoke a client and send them to prison to serve their underlying sentence, you followed a pattern, and the pattern was, they called them dips and dunks. The dips were the jail bed stays, and you had to accomplish so many of those prior to that, and then you could send them to prison for a dunk. And there were 2 options, and the judges, I think, are mandated in certain options to consider those. And we use them a lot, both the jail bed stays and the prison stays. Well, now there's a law that passed, I think, the Senate and the House. I hope I'm speaking true about this, so I think that's right. And now it's in committee for discussion, and it reduces, the dunks down to, they were 180 and 120, and now I think the max you could even do is 60 days. And at the time, it was a day, good credit for every day, so that's 30 days. It's in the prison, and increase the jail days. And so if that law passes, our agency and court services will be expected to utilize more bed space on violations that the clients are committing and less prison space. I'm not a proponent of lockdown being the answer for anybody's violations, but we're just seeing more and more of that where it's pushed down. One of the things we hear all the time is if we recommend and the judge orders them to a prison dunk, we've had a large portion of our clients sit in the county jail the entire time because the prison didn't come and get them. For whatever reason, they blame the counties blame the state. I have no idea whose fault it is. I just know they're not coming and picking up the client. And they get out, and they've literally served their time in the county jail. So in my vision, I'm not so sure it really impacts one way or the other, but I know as they move along and do these things, it's hurting the jail bed space.
Okay.
Commissioner, all the rest of the questions that have been received were basically already blanket covered, and then the rest of them that are just don't conform to the rules that were set forth at the beginning of this town hall.
Okay. Well, we'll move to the fun part of it then. That is where those of you that wish to speak can do so. We encourage you to do that. Your comments, we would appreciate if you'd limit your comments to 3 minutes and state your name and your address, and here we go.
Good evening.
Hello.
My name is Jim Vint, and I live at 1115 Andrew Avenue. Well, the Saline County Jail is overpopulated, so arrest fewer people, eliminate cash bonding, and quit piling on charges to force a plea bargain. So these are entirely realistic options, and a review, I think it's useful to look at the literature. So I brought 2 books that directly relate to jail population. First one is these are both from the Salina Library. First one's Pulled Over, and I'll just read very shortly from this. No form of government control comes close to the police stop. Each year, 12% of drivers in the United States are stopped by police, and the figure almost doubles for racial minorities. Pulled Over documents these disparities and deftly traces the strange history of the investigatory police stop from its discredited beginning as aggressive patrolling to its current status as acceptable institutional practice. So it's a academic work, and why are so many people being stopped and arrested? Well, they go into it in detail. And in the second book, also from the Salina Library, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarcerations in the Age of Color Blindness, and I'll just quote very, very briefly from that. This book is not for everybody. I'll skip ahead. I am also writing this book for another audience, those who have been struggling to persuade their friends, neighbors, relatives, teachers, co-workers, or political representatives that something is eerily familiar about the way our criminal justice system operates, something that looks and feels a lot like an era we supposedly left behind, but who have lacked the facts and data to back up their claims. I'm writing this book for all those trapped within America's latest caste system. So in the third book, which I don't have with me because it's a new book and it's on the 14-day checkout cycle and there's a list of people waiting for it, is a book called The Border, B-O-R-D-E-R, by Don Winslow. And quoting very briefly from that, the war on drugs has become a self-sustaining economic machine. Towns that once competed for factories now vie to build prisons. We have capitalized corrections. Corporations now make profits keeping humans behind bars. Courts, lawyers, police, prisons, we are more addicted to the war on drugs than to the drugs against which we waged this war. So what's been the result of this 50 years? Drugs are more plentiful, more powerful, and more available than ever. Fatal drug doses are at a record high. All this while drugs are illegal, and if this is victory, I'd hate to see defeat. So from this slight sample, and from a vast array of other supporting communications, including a statement by the Saline County attorney in which she said that the precipitous increase in murders in Saline County was directly correlated to methamphetamine abuse, informed reality is that we cannot arrest our way out of a decaying culture. No new jail.
All right. Thank you.
My name's Lene Meyer, and I live at 2242 Huntington Road. And I have to say quickly, at home, when I was hearing about this, I thought, wow, I got to go speak my truth. Getting up here, I'm freaking out, but, so bear with me. I am a licensed addiction counselor, and I'm a volunteer at the state prisons, both male and female. And I'm aware of Annie and her work, and I support what she's doing. I hope, instead of looking at so much that building a building is going to solve the problem, it will not. Addiction is a disease. It is not a character flaw. So, and until we can start treating people as human beings with a disease, which means going further than deeper than the addiction. I've read recently that the primary disease is family and cultural dysfunction. And if you really work with these folks that have problems with this disease, you'll learn they're very wounded at a deep level and choose to use drugs and alcohol to cover up. I'm not saying, I saw on your information that marijuana is not the number one reason persons are in jail, but we have a huge issue with meth, alcohol. And I suspect if you all will get to thinking about your own friends, relatives, there's probably some stuff going on in a lot of people's lives that are in this room at various degrees. So I want to emphasize that money needs to be allocated to treat the disease. You might build a big building, but the problem is not going to end with that, I guarantee you. By the way, marijuana is a gateway drug. The patients that I work with, majority of them have started their career, their disease process with using marijuana. So I'm sure hoping it's not legalized in Kansas. So it's very important that our funding, and that's where my tax dollar needs to go, a big part of it anyway, is to continue to fund and increase what Annie and her people are trying to do. And and I'm not always talking about mentally ill people either. People have family dysfunction and this feeling disease, and they're not mentally ill. They're wounded souls, like you and I are in this room. So money needs to go there, and there needs to be more programming to address the core issues of addiction. So let's see. That's where I want my tax money to go. And so I'm saying my comments based on logic. It is a disease. My emotions, my heart bleeds for people who have this disease. I've dealt with many who are wounded souls. And I want you to consider putting more and more funds, or my tax dollar, into treating the disease. Building a building is not going to get it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Dave Smith, 498 North Headville Road. I too appreciate what Annie and Community Corrections are doing, as well as Serenity House and others that are helping reduce the population. But to address this population issue, we need to start at the root cause. For over 50 years, public education has taught, without offering any alternative, that we humans are merely a higher form of animal without accountability to a creator. The moral code in Scripture has been eliminated, so there is no moral base, no such thing as truth, and every man does what was right in his own eyes. Furthermore, to recognize certain behavior that the Bible calls sin is considered hate speech and not allowed. To correct this problem will require school boards to operate on a basis of courage and principle, not fear. It will also require legislation to offer protection from the all too ambitious attorneys who want to sue. But there are many who disagree, and even if implemented, it would take time to produce any results. In the meantime, 4 areas need to be addressed. They've already been spoken about: long delays in sentencing. It's often months before a trial is given. Whether guilty or not, the inmate's life is radically altered by loss of job, vehicle, even home, so the ability to stay out when released is greatly reduced. The Bible says, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set on evil. Second, no pain, no gain is true beyond exercise. Pain was designed by our Creator to cause a change in behavior. A hot fire that burns your face says back off. If we felt no pain, we damage ourselves. So it is with wrong behavior. Again, Proverbs says, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, The rod of discipline drives it far from him. Jail is simply too comfortable. 3 meals a day, warm in the winter, cool in the summer, free medical, no responsibility, no work required, TV entertainment, no gain, no pain. 3, there's very little restoration taking place within the jail. Inmates are simply locked up and lives are wasted. Yes, corrective programs require some cost, but far better to spend here than simply build a bigger barn to house them. There are lots of areas where work could be prescribed and work itself is therapeutic. There's a history of distrust between the commission and the sheriff's office. I hope that's changed so full cooperation and trust can take place to both fund and design opportunities for restoration to happen. And 4, the lives of known murderers in a timely manner would be ended, would greatly reduce jail populations. God's word says it's a deterrent to crime. He certainly knows better than we do. It was God's first directive for human government in Genesis, and we would do well to follow it. Simply building a bigger jail not only fails to solve a serious problem, it will make the problem worse. It would be in the same as the federal government does when raising the debt ceiling, giving some temporary relief without fixing the problem.
Thank you for your comments.
Thanks, Dave.
Norman Mantle, Salina, Kansas. There's 2 words in Mr. Robinson's report: population reduction. You're going to have to go back where we started. As the population increases, so do the candidates to commit crimes. Mr. Robinson says population reduction. This is a worldwide problem. We're going to increase the population in the next 30 years to how many billion? It keeps changing. The prosecuting attorney, I believe, has the option of not filing charges. Some of these charges they shouldn't even be filing. They can arrest them, bring them to the prosecutor, and can the prosecutor say, well, I'm not going to file these charges because they aren't worth having. Well, that's why we got more people in jail. Don't be filing some of these charges, but make the legislators remove these laws. You're putting our law enforcement people in a predicament. They've got to enforce the law. Remove some of them things, but it's still going to come back to population reduction. It's a percentage. Do the numbers. You can build all the jails you want. There are countries that are limiting the amount of children you have. You do not have the right to populate this planet. It's going to happen. You can see it down the road from 20, 30 years from now. I wrote the obituary of what's happening on this planet, and it's going to get worse unless you do something. That's about everything I've got. Oh, eminent domain. You're not going to use eminent domain no more. This has already happened in other states. You ain't going to be able to take this land. It's already happened. In the state east of here, they tried to take some land. The court says no. So you ain't going to be able to build a new jail. It's unconstitutional. So that's, until you reduce the population, you're not going to solve this problem.
My guess is that's out of the control of the county commission, but thank you.
But stop and go start talking to the legislators. Quit bringing up these silly laws. You got to throw everybody in jail for frivolous ideas. You put our law enforcement guys in a bad predicament.
Thank you for your comments.
I know, I've been there.
Anyone else?
Randall Holm, Salina, Kansas. I have one thing that I think needs to be looked at real hard that was brought up during the discussions, and that was that the number of trips has increased by 24-fold while the number of inmates has only increased by 3.5-fold, roughly. We maybe should be looking real hard at what's causing those additional trips and start holding the attorneys that should be getting their jobs done accountable for not doing their jobs, and or any of the other issues that have caused that drastic increase in travel time for the inmates that are housed out of county. I'm also a firm believer that the great social experiment of being soft on criminals over the last 60 years has proven to be one of the biggest failures this country has ever seen. We have seen nothing but a drastic increase in violent crimes, alcohol abuse, and drug abuse within our country as we started slapping people on the hands instead of treating them more harshly in allowable ways than we are currently doing. We have taken too much of the penalty out of being in a jail and turned it into more of a break from society with air conditioning and heat and 3 meals a day for too many people, where being confined is not punishment, or at least not enough punishment to deter them from wanting to return. In too much of our society, a sentence to jail and serving jail time is considered as advanced education in the gangs they go back to. We need to make changes that jail is no longer a pleasant place for anyone to be at. And do it in a humane manner, but still make it a bad situation to be in. I do have a strong disagreement with the woman that spoke earlier that kept referring to drug addiction and maybe alcohol addiction both as diseases. Neither one is a disease. It's a lifestyle choice for 90 to 99% of the people involved. There are some chemical imbalances within people that may drive a few of those to a disease category, but in the vast majority, it is a lifestyle choice, not a disease. And if we return to some punishment and education, maybe we can get more of them to make the right choice, lifestyle-wise. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Linda Anderson, and I'm from Salina. I disagree with the gentleman that spoke before me about many of the topics that he was talking about, because I work for a government agency. I also work with inmates daily, and my comment would be to maybe rework the bond schedule, lower bonds. I don't know why that wasn't realized initially. That should have been one thing that should have been done first before the pretrial program was put in place, any of these other programs, because we're spending money that way when we can lower bonds a little bit. That hasn't been reworked for several years, to the best of my knowledge.
Also out of our control.
Sure, but that's something that you can also speak with the people that be about. That would drastically reduce some of the population, in my opinion, before we go, because we have the reasonable right to a reasonable bond. That is our right as American citizens, and so that is something I think that we need to reevaluate and rework. I think that's something that should have been implemented prior to any of the other programs that have been implemented, and that was my question. Why was that assessed prior when the contractor was here doing the assessment?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David Norland, 608 East Republic, Salina. I had a few comments, but I wanted to get some clarity if I could. First, I'll sit down for this. But Roger, you were, if I understood you correctly, you were saying that you felt that the increase in the prison population was directly connected to when we started farming out, sending to other, if I understood you correctly. And could you explain that a little bit?
Well,
I didn't understand.
Dave, let
the
me
reason.
stop you. We're not going to field the questions from that standpoint. If you would like to talk to Roger in a different setting, I would encourage that. But right now, we're wanting people to address the commission with ideas on how to better serve the jail population that we're dealing with. And we're not, the question and answer portion is over. So now we would like your viewpoints.
Yeah,
And so, go ahead.
And that's fine, I'll be glad to do that. I just think that
Okay, thank you.
this public is here for that information, and that had me puzzled if we're trying to figure out how to reduce jail population. I think it's something that the public needs to hear, just to understand what is going through the sheriff's mind. And no disrespect intended, I just didn't understand that.
I understand that.
So as far as my comments are concerned, I would join with Ms. Anderson in saying that some of the sentiments expressed about urging harsher penalty for prisoners is not what we're about as a civilized society, but it's really not what we're talking about here. We're talking about how to, so I think just it's important to point that out. I know that there are many factors involved. Clearly, many that have been addressed here, from drug use to bonds to financial situations, they are complicated, and we have to rely on public servants to handle it. And you as commissioners are looking at perhaps a single issue with, I'm sure you've acknowledged, a lot of complicated input. As you said, Mr. Vidderson, you have no little control over that. And I want to say that I'm indebted to Karen Shade in her comments and her research on this. I think she's asked some very excellent questions. But one of the things that I'm looking at this, I'm still sort of nonplussed and still find a need for a better answer, is that when you look at a 2014 study compared to now, and there's nearly a twofold increase, almost double the price, almost regardless of that, I find it hard to buy that inflation is a part of that. And I know there are many calculations about the kind of facility we want, et cetera. But
Keep in mind that those are estimates too on his part. Those
I
weren't
understand
architectural
that.
drawings
That
or
estimate
anything
is
like that
almost twice
involved.
as much in 5 years, and I'm not buying the inflation thing. I mean, I
get it.
I think that the commission and officials need to look carefully at that. So,
Thank you. That's a good point. Anyone else?
Good evening.
Well, John.
First of all, my name is John Blanchard. First of all, Chairman, Commissioners, and staff, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge and thank you for having this town hall meeting, especially at a time where a lot of people could and did attend. Boy, I tell you what, from the last time we had this issue come up and when it went to referendum, I thought I knew a little bit about the jail and the problem, and I think what this all illustrates is how things evolve, opinions evolve, conditions evolve. Ms. Grievous, great job on the drug court, the innovative programs. I think they're doing great. It sounds like the pretrial has great promise. One of the things that has remained consistent for me is that when we were going through this the last time, Douglas County was going through the same thing. I read an awful lot from an organization called Kansas Appleseed. And one of the biggest recommendations they made that hit home with me, and I have to say I agree completely with Lene on her comments, and that is that what their suggestion was for the community of Douglas, for Douglas County and Lawrence, was the best benefit that they could approach their problem with was a state-of-the-art mental health facility. And so I noticed in your option number 4, the Greenfield option, it was the only one I saw that had any mention of a mental health facility. And so I would ask you, we had a lot of, we have people in the room that are mental health professionals, and I am not one of those people. So I would ask that maybe we draw upon the significant expertise we have in this community on mental health, help to make that part of the solution with the rest of this, but you have a big problem on your hands, and I tell you what, I have confidence that this group can together and the community make it happen this time, because mental health is a disease, substance abuse is a disease, and I think that a lot of us do recognize that. What I do know that this team that you guys have here will rely upon professional opinions. And the study also, I'd like to, if you can, let us all know where we can read more about this study. But I also know individually and as a group, you guys have a lot of compassion. And I think that's going to be an ingredient that is going to be very necessary for whatever solution we're going to find. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for your time. Anyone else wish to address the commission?
Good evening. I wasn't going to speak till Annie called me out. Amy Norton, I am the Deputy County Attorney. If anybody needs me, my office is upstairs in room 302. I just wanted to address a couple things since this is a public information situation. Overall, in the last couple of years, the amount of crime committed in this community, the amount of cases charged by our office is down. Unfortunately, the severity of the type of crime that we're seeing has gone up. The pretrial supervision program does not address the most serious type of violent crime. I don't believe it addresses the most serious type of drug offenses, drug trafficking type crimes. What it is addressed is the sort of, I hate to use the word mundane, but the sort of more run-of-the-mill type offenses. I do think it will get people out of jail faster. Unfortunately, with the increase in violent crime, which is prompted by 1,000 different factors that we could talk about all night, it's not going to solve every problem. It's not going to get every inmate or defendant out of jail faster. Somebody talked about the delay in the actual process of getting a case through the system. In the last couple of years, our overall time of getting a case from the time a person's arrested to the time the case is resolved, we are between my office, defense attorneys, the courts, we're getting faster. Somebody talked about a delay between the time you enter a plea and the time you're sentenced. That's set by statute. In a felony case, there has to be something called a pre-sentence investigation report prepared. That has to be done by the court services office. That requires an officer there to track down somebody's entire criminal history, talk to a victim, collect restitution information, and prepare what I think is up to about a 12-page report, and that's for one offense. If there's additional offenses, there needs to be additional work done, and right now it takes that office about 60 days to get those reports prepared. So that's the reason there's a delay between plea and sentencing. Also, if they're like in a DUI case or a drug and alcohol case where that's an issue, there has to be an evaluation done. That has to take time to get the report done. So we're not just basically entering pleas and then just letting people sit in jail. There's generally a statutory reason for why that delay is occurring. Continuances by defense counsel. I don't want Linda to be mad at me. I'm not faulting the public defender's office. I respect every one of our defense attorneys that we work with, but the public defender's office is so understaffed and so underpaid that they have occasionally in the last couple of months actually had to stop taking cases. That requires us to get what we call conflict counsel. They are not always local attorneys. So Sheriff Solden is correct. It is a self-made problem with contract housing. An attorney who does not live locally in Salina is not going to have the time to come here, find out their client has been shipped off to Ford County or Washington County, and then make that 4 and 5 hour drive round trip. Those other jail facilities, some of them are nice and will let their clients use the phone and make phone arrangements, and at least they can talk to them by phone, but not all facilities do that. So I do say it is unfortunately a self-made problem in that we have attorneys who literally can't access their clients, and that does delay the process. It's not the defendant's fault. It's not the attorney's fault. It's just, that's the problem we've created. So I do think a couple of these proposed solutions would certainly help us in that respect. In terms of mental health, last thing I wanted to address, if you are, if your attorney has any indication that you have a mental health issue, they get a mental health evaluation or, a competency evaluation. Those are generally paid for by the county. Unfortunately, if you're found to be mentally ill, there are almost no beds to send you. It takes about 4 months now, I think, Sheriff Solden, to get somebody to Larned State Security Hospital, which is where the law says we have to send them if they're found to be incompetent. So that's another reason why, unfortunately, folks who may present with mental health issues aren't being addressed in a timely or speedy manner. And again, that's not before this commission. There's not much this commission can do about that. But I just wanted to take an opportunity and sort of address some of the issues that I've heard. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the enlightening comments. Appreciate it very much. Someone else?
My name is Patty Killingsworth. I live at 513 Russell. I just wanted to agree with the one gentleman who said that they need to stop prosecuting for just minor things, because the jail should be more for the people that are a danger to society, not just the neighbors afraid of them, or I have a few examples that I could give where, like, somebody just broke a neighbor's flower pot and got arrested. Now, that's totally uncalled for, and that person was prosecuted. And when a family member fights domestic family disturbance, you don't need to charge for little penny anythings. Put them in jail. A lady that couldn't pay her dog fine, couldn't bond out, she sat in jail for 6 weeks. Now, we don't need to prosecute the people that are not a danger to society. Let's keep the people in jail that need to be in jail, and let some of these out that are not a danger, that we know for a fact that are not danger, just because they can't afford their bond or they can't afford to pay their fine, they should still be able to get out of jail. And that should allow more space for the ones that actually need to be in there, which I know some that do, that actually get out. And you kind of wonder where the balance is on somebody that did something that's kind of criminal, and somebody that did something like can't pay a fine. One's in jail and one isn't. I think we need to look more at how many charges get pressed and for what reason are we pressing these charges, and ask ourselves, is this person a danger to society, which a lot of these people aren't. And we could probably fill up or free up a lot of the beds if a lot of these people that weren't a danger to nobody other than maybe the neighbor, let them out of jail. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your comments. One more? No? Oh.
Hi, I'm Sheila Shelberg, Salina resident. I did have a question. It wasn't answered, so now it's going to become a suggestion or my comment. Would there be a possibility to ever consider doing more personal bonds for things like driving on suspended or other minor traffic issues that put people in jail over the weekends or for an extended amount of time where they can't already pay their fines, so now they've lost their job, so when they get out of jail, they have more fines that they can't pay? Would that be a possibility? Because I just think that needs to be looked at, building a bigger place to house people for... It's just kind of like, when do you stop? Like, might need to go look at some acreage or something at some point, unless you address issues that are actually going to make a difference in people's quality of life.
Thank you. And I assure you, we have talked over that very subject at hours at the end. So, all right, it looks like that's probably the size of the public comment. I want to thank every one of you. The comments that I'm hearing, they've headed pretty much down the same path, it seems like, in sometimes in a different way, but down the same path. So I would like to ask if there are any commissioners who would like to comment, Monty or Roger?
Just want to thank everybody for coming. I think that it was important, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for calling this. And this won't be the end of the conversation, I assure you.
Not by any stretch. So, Roger, anything?
And just thank you for all the input and the work for everybody that did this whole committee thing, you know, and thank all of you for your comments and your questions also. Yep, thank you.
Mr. Weiss?
I wish there was a magic wand that we could wave and solve this problem. The comments that I heard tonight, some of them are very enlightening, and so I appreciate the attendance and the concern of the citizens.
Mr. White?
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Well, as Commissioner Shadwick alluded to, this won't be the last one of these meetings because, you know, we really haven't discussed this at all among ourselves. We've all had the reports and trying to digest it. We welcome your emails, your comments. I'm sure that Sheriff Solden, Andrew, and Hannah, the commissioners email us, Annie. You know, we need help. You know, we're not the smartest. Well, the four of them are pretty smart. I'm not. I better reserve that comment for myself. So, at any rate, thank you again for coming, and we're trying our best. I can promise you that. So, I would take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
And moved and seconded that we adjourn to this evening's meeting. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We're done. Stop and talk to